Okay, so now we're going to go more into his acting resume with one of his first films that uh, I even saw and I still love to this day, Blackboard Jungle. He is more of a supporting role, but it has like Glenn Ford, Vic Morrow. For you MASH fans, it has Jamie Farr. It is directed by Richard Brooks. It's 1950s. Teacher tries to inspire his troubled students, and Vic Morrow is more the troubled thug teacher. And Sidney Poitier, strangely, is a tough kid, one of the few black students in this school, but he is also kind of the leader, I guess, of the blacks who goes to this school. It has its obvious, what I will call 21 Jump Street moments, where everybody looks a little too old to be playing teenagers. But for the most part, it's a great film that keeps you on the edge of your seat. I mean, Vic Morrow has played many classic roles, but this is the one I'll probably think of him the most in this type of role, playing the racist, drunk, drug addicted, always seems to have a switchblade thug in this. Did you see a Blackboard Jungle?
I saw Blackboard Jungle back in 1999. Long
Wow.
story short, I was going through a difficult period in high school, and someone I knew recommended me to watch this film. I didn't know Sidney Poitier was in it, about it, and there's obviously a lot of things going on. Like you said, it was kind of the start of the teacher getting into the inner city school and trying to inspire and shape the minds of these troubled kids. But it's
Hmm.
significant for Portier that this was one of those roles that stood out at the beginning of his career, because I think if it was up to any other black actor at that period, it would have been a full blown stereotype. It would have been, maybe dumbed down to make it accessible to a wide audience. And this was like a real gripping kind of performance that he plays. As small as it is, it's important to show, at least the way it was on the street, and not people
Hmm.
just saying jive stuff and acting like they have to dress in fancy outfits. Like Sydney was real for that time, and I think that goes a long way with that genre as it progressed.
Well, this was definitely a movie. I saw To Sir with Love first, and then went back to see this film. So it's jarring the difference. But then again, look at the time period. But I also will give, next to Glenn Ford, Sidney Poitier is the best dressed person in this film, which is why one of the things I will always say about Sidney Poitier in films, he always had style. Like no matter what film, the whatever wardrobe they put him in, he always looked dapper, no matter what role, he was supposed to be playing. Even if it was like just a commoner, he still always looked sharp. So that is one of the things that always stayed with me when it came to Sidney Poitier, because he was somebody I could always look to. Like, if you want to look stylish, look at what he's wearing. Next is 1958's Defiant Ones, a movie I know you didn't see, or at least not the full way through. Um, this one I'll say I've seen it. I mean, he co-stars with Tony Curtis. They're escaped prisoners who are handcuffed together. They end up going to like crashing on a farm with a woman who eventually gets them separated. And of course, Tony Curtis at first is tough with the woman, and then they kind of get a romance. But then towards the end, she wants him to stay, but it says they should turn Sidney Poitier in. And throughout the film, I guess Sidney Poitier and Tony Curtis, even though Tony Curtis even starts off the film as a racist, their bond at this point has become so complete that he's torn between turning him in and living this life with this woman, or going on the run and helping Sidney Poitier. I don't want to spoil the ending, but I mean, it's directed by Stanley Kramer, who directed a lot of these films that were kind of social message films of the time. This is probably, to me, the best out of all of them, out of all of the three. And it's the only one where I felt Sidney had to more perform, because he's playing a little bit more like less intelligent than he usually plays in a film, so but I would definitely recommend it. Um, Next up, we have 1961's Paris Blues with Paul Newman, Joanne Woodward, Diane Carroll, and a cameo by Louis Armstrong. This is a romance film set in France between two jazz musicians. Again, this movie is more Sidney playing supporting than lead because it's all about Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward, but his character also romances Joanne Woodward's character, and the whole plot hinges on not only the romance but the fact that Diane Carroll wants him to come back to America and get married and have kids, but he feels in Paris he can be more free as a black man than going back to the States and having sort of the grovel. So it's so at least his storyline is sort of like a lot of black expatriates who move to foreign countries, particularly France, to feel a bit more free and be who they want to be. By any chance, did you see Paris Blues?
I saw this movie back when I was putting together my short film, The Saxophonist, because I liked that kind of parallel between the jazz music and the romance in the film. And yeah, I agree with you on that point as well. That it's sort of the the sort of intermixing of the romances makes it interesting to watch, given that time period and how tense it was. That to have these guys who are away from the tensions in America and having these romances in a place like Paris made it much more ahead of its time in a sense. You know, like it felt like there were a lot of movies that came after this. Like I would go as far as say White Knight, Gregory Hines, that kind of went into
Okay.
the whole idea of being away from America, having an interracial relationship, and trying to get through the hardships of life outside the country. And really, the music stands out more than the film itself. I think the story is a little bit thin, but it definitely is like significant for his filmography.
Okay, next we have, sorry folks for that, Lilies of the Field from 1963, directed by Ralph Nelson. This is the infamous film only because this is the one that Sidney Poitier actually won the Oscar for. His first and so far only Best Actor Oscar, other than the Oscar he won when Training Day for Denzel Washington, where he got an honorary Oscar also. This is about a handyman who basically helps these nuns in the middle of nowhere build their church. And now this film, it's an uplifting film, and it doesn't really go into faith, but it shows the goodness of one man. And I will say, this is probably one of Sidney Poitier's most charming roles because he's more of a drifter. He doesn't seem as educated as he usually does, and the song that he sings with them is always memorable throughout the film. It's kind of a hymn. By any chance, Andre, did you see this film?
I have a copy of it because I have a box set of all of his movies that he made for MGM, but I've never actually watched it. And I think it's mostly because, especially those movies in that period, you know, there's always been that criticism that his films strayed more to a white audience. And it's, black audiences in particular, not everybody, but like people who live in low economic environments felt that he was nothing more than that he was just a guy trying to appease, white America. And certainly films like this and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner seem to, play into that particular notion of him as the Uber Negro, as they would call him. I do intend to watch it at some point,
Okay.
but that's basically like just the one thing that's kind of helped me back a bit.
Well, I mean, with this film, I'm not going to admit. In the future, there would be plenty of examples of mystical, magical Negro helping white people based off of this film. But at least here, he seems to be more of a human being. Like he has his own problems and things, rather than the other roles where the guys just come out of nowhere and just seem to be from heaven sent. Okay, next we have 1965's The Slender Thread, directed by Sidney Pollack, where Sidney Poitier plays surprisingly more of a supporting role, even though he's a top billed star, where he plays a suicide hotline worker who takes the phone call of Anne Bancroft, who's trying to commit suicide. And she basically tells her story of what led her to this point. And he's just trying to keep her on the line so that they can locate her and keep her from killing herself. And Telly Savalas plays his supervisor. And the film also co-stars Ed Asner and Stephen Hill. It's a dramatic thriller that leans a lot into melodrama. I mean, it's just shocking that, after he's winning Best Actor, he's kind of playing this type of role, even though it is a meaty role, but it's something you would think, obviously, like today, if you had won a Best Actor, you'd be getting better roles than this. This is something that seems like he would take before he won the Best Actor. It's not a bad film. It's serviceable. I mean, you have one of Sidney Pollack's first films that he directed. By any chance, have you seen The Slender Thread?
I've actually never heard this movie until you brought it up, and now I'm interested because, like, if it later works through the 3 Days of the Condor, Tootsie, Absence of Malice, so I would definitely want to see a movie like this.
Wow, I'm shocked you've never heard of this one with such a star-studded cast. Also that year he made A Patch of Blue, which it comes before Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, of a kind of interracial romance. This is more of a lead for Sidney Poitier, and he's very good in it, playing kind of the most civilized person in this film. Have you ever seen or apparently heard of this film?
I don't think I've seen it, but is that the one where they have the montage where like everybody's dancing on the street and you got like the lights behind them, or was that Guess Who's Coming to Dinner?
I really couldn't tell. I haven't seen either, quite recently, so I'm not quite sure. But this was in black and white, whereas Guess Who's Coming to Dinner is in color. Does that help?
Thinking of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, but I haven't seen this one, to be honest.
Oh, this is another one of those lost classics, apparently, for you, that you should see. I would say see this one before you see The Slender Thread. This has more Sidney, and he has more to do in this film. And of course, we come to my favorite Sidney Poitier film of all time, To Sir with Love. I mean, do I really have to tell all of you people about this film? It's a certified classic. This is the one you would think would have been the film that won him the Oscar. This is another film. I can see what you're saying about like how maybe some disenfranchised African Americans felt like he was playing too like upper class or bougie, because here he goes to England, he's treated like crap by all the people around him who are mainly Caucasian and his students, and yet he always acts civilized, except for maybe two scenes where he loses anger. To me, whereas people might say, oh, he's kind of like selling out, this film to me showed, again, like A Patch of Blue, he's the most civilized and like charming person throughout this whole film, where most of the Caucasians are just showing, their ass, literally, treating him like all this, and he's just serving it up with a smile. And then even when he does show his anger, he's like, still like, compared to what he could have done, it's just amazing. And of course, this film has Lulu co-starring, who sung the theme song, and it's based on a book, a true story, obviously. And yeah, this is my all-time favorite Sidney Poitier film. So, because he's got it all. He's got the classiness, he's got the style, he's got the charm, even all the girls kind of go for him at the end because he's the first gentleman they've ever met. Please tell me, Andre, you've seen this one.
I hate to say I've only seen the Lulu performance in the gymnasium. It's a movie I still to this day need to see, because the only thing I've seen is the straight to television sequel directed by Peter Bogdanovich.
Oh,
and I know we may or may not talk about that later, but that's the only. It's like one of those. Why does he have to get made?
I'm just like, yeah, I would put that as maybe one of the worst sequels ever made. It doesn't make me, if anything, it makes me like this film even so much more, because it shows what, and the thing that kills me is that To Sir with Love 2, you have more of a polished director directing that. But again, the script wasn't up to snuff, and this is based on an actual true story. So, but I would say out of all the films we've mentioned you haven't seen, this is the one you have to see. Put that at the top of your list. Okay, next we have, of course, the infamous, the classic, In the Heat of the Night, which was made in the same year as To Sir with Love. This film, I will admit, I saw later, but it's still a hard impacting film when you watch it today. I mean, come on with the "They Call Me Mr. Tibbs" and the smack heard across the world. And even Rod Steiger, even though he's chewing scenery, and of course he won the Oscar for this film, but we all know who the true star of this film is because he was in the sequels. So, but this is also a film you wouldn't think would have a sequel. It's the one time you have a social justice movie done right because it also works as a thriller, and the message isn't like hitting you over the head. Because even though it is a social justice thriller and one person learns to not be racist, pretty much that's it. All the other characters still keep their racism. He's the smartest one in the room, even though he has to learn the Southern country ways. And this is probably one of the first films that I really can say I noticed the atmosphere in the background while watching the film. I mean, the cinematography is top notch, production design, location scouting, and it has a little va-va-voom sexiness, and Warren Oates sneak peeking, which is a major plot device. So, what do you think of In the Heat of the Night?
I love In the Heat of the Night. I've seen it at home, and I've also seen it in a civil rights course that I took at Emerson College. And even when I watched that with the audience in my class, I mean, they were totally into it, especially the Mr. Tibbs part. It's like you said, it's a movie that really combines a solid whodunit murder mystery thriller with the social commentary of the dirty South and this educated cop from Philadelphia coming down, really just inadvertently getting involved in the case because they think, oh, he's a stranger, and they try to arrest him, and then it turns out, oh no, he's actually a detective and gets involved and starts to show him some shit. I mean, this was like the precursor to something like Beverly Hills Cop, just in the overall tone, in the cinematography, the way it's shot, like those scenes with the crime scenes going on and the police lights at night. This film, I mean, it made not only Sidney Poitier an icon, but I think it was the movie that really solidified Norman Jewison as a director. What he
Yes.
did after that really, made him probably one of the most underrated filmmakers of our time. If you ask for my opinion on that, it's just it's an instant classic. I love the Quincy Jones score. The Ray Charles theme song is unforgettable, and it's on a TV show with Howard Rollins and Carol O'Connor.
I was gonna ask you about that.
Yeah,
Yeah, the show wasn't as good, even though it lasted many seasons.
yeah, I mean, God bless Howard Rollins, but he couldn't hold Sidney's jockstrap. That was Sidney Poitier is Mr. Tibbs. There's just no dispute about it.
Well, which is interesting because the next movie I want to bring up is actually They Call Me Mr. Tibbs from 1970. I love Sidney Poitier. We should have stopped it In the Heat of the Night, because this sequel, it tries, but it's not as good. It is directed by Gordon Douglas. It stars Martin Landau, Ed Asner again, and Anthony Zerbe. I haven't seen it in years, and I can barely remember it. I just remember how disappointed I was watching it. By any chance, did you see it?
Yeah, I have the DVD along with the next film we'll probably talk about. I don't remember it much either. I know they showed a little bit more of his family, like Barbara McNair, I believe, played his wife, and I think he had a kid in it. This was at the point where, look, In the Heat of the Night is an instant classic. As a one-note film, from start to finish, there was no need to continue this character. The second they decided to make a sequel, it turned into the Dirty Harry series. It's just, let's take that same guy and put him on another case. There's no commentary to it. It doesn't have the same cinematic sound. It feels like a made-for-TV movie. And
it's more of a procedural.
Yeah, it was more like some of the movies he would do in the 80s, where he just played the suit and tie cop solving a case, and there's not much personality to him. So there's no bite like there was within the Heat of the Night.
I agree. And we also, before we can get into 1980s, Sidney Poitier must discuss his other classic, the 1967 film Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, with, of course, Spencer Tracy, Katharine Hepburn, him, Bayer Richards, and Louise Jefferson playing the maid. I know this is a cinematic classic. I don't like this film. I don't hate it. I respect what it was trying to do, but so many problems. Like, he has to be near saintly just to date their college, dreamer daughter, and I always found that very insulting. Again, he's one of the most, he's the smartest guy in the room. And I guess the way they portray most of the black characters in this film is just so, I don't know, they just always seem so solemn and sad. Like, oh, Mr. White Man, I hope you approve of this, because it's all on Spencer Tracy's shoulders. And I mean, it's memorable for like one of the last times Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn are in a movie together. But it was just like, really? I mean, it's revolutionary for its time, and we only see them kiss in the beginning in a cab mirror, and but it was just like, the person who gives the most liveliest performance is actually, because I can't remember her name, so I'll keep referring to her as Louise Jefferson as the maid, who thinks that Sidney's character is some kind of hustler, and she's raised her since she was a baby and isn't gonna let some two-bit hustler come in and take advantage of her. But I'm like, I mean, watch it because if you're a film historian. But again, Stanley Kramer's at the helm. He's not the best director. He's not subtle at all. Watch it if you have to, but I just don't like it personally. How do you feel about it?
I've never seen it, to be honest. I maybe saw like the first 10, 20 minutes of it on TCM one night. But again, it goes back to what I said earlier. Some of these films, it takes me a lot to go back and watch them because of the fact that it was Sidney Poitier playing the type of guy that white audiences could accept, like a straight, educated black man in a suit and tie. And this really, adds to that. I think this is where maybe the backlash started to happen against him from the black audience, to see him constantly with white women. That's why Denzel Washington, had this period where he refused to like have a romantic relationship with a white woman in a movie. He's made some exceptions, and I don't ask me how he does that, but Sidney was kind of like already paving the way for that, and you could see it was starting to get accolades on one hand, but on the other hand, the backlash from his own people.
Do you think maybe that's what have led him eventually to decide, like, you know what, I'm taking a break from acting? And
I think that was part of it. And again, he started doing the movies with Cosby to try to lighten up his image. And I guess there just weren't good scripts around because, again, the blaxploitation period he wanted nothing to do with. And then once that phased out, nobody was writing for black actors unless it was like a historical piece.
well, there was one film I'm going to mention, but I didn't write any of the specifics down because this is one I infamously haven't seen, and I kick myself for not seeing it. His one true African American romantic film, For the Love of Ivy, which I have not seen, but I know Beau Bridges plays, this white hippie liberal who tries to set up basically his maid or his family's maid with his black professor. And slowly throughout the film, they start to date and fall in love, even though they come from, I guess, what would be considered two different classes. And the thing, I've only seen bits and pieces of the film. I know one of the most memorable things about the film was Sidney Poitier smokes in this film. That's all I really remember. By any chance, did you see it?
No, I haven't seen it.
Okay. So that's all we'll say about that. But at least he tried making a black purely, love story. Unfortunately, another film I didn't mention that I didn't have enough time to catch up with and it is a black classic film, A Raisin in the Sun, based on the theatrical play. I have not seen the Sidney Poitier version. I have seen the version that stars Felicia Rashad that was made for TV after the successful Broadway revival, with unfortunately Sean P. Diddy Combs playing the Sidney Poitier role. By any chance, did you see A Raisin in the Sun?
I feel like I've seen it in school, but I don't remember it for the life of me.
I remember it's one of those like classic African American plays where there's a lot of suffering, and where I don't know if you ever saw this on a Saturday Night Live old sketch, but it had like Sinbad, hear me out, and Chris Rock, and it was basically showing how like in the suffering like all black films, how the acting was like, mama, I'm gonna buy you a big house, and that type of acting. And from the scenes I've seen from this film, there is a bit of that, but again, I can't say anything because I haven't seen the whole 2-hour version of it. So and I know another film you saw that I didn't see from before the 80s. Was it Father John that you saw?
Brother John.
Brother John, sorry, excuse me. Can you tell us a little more about that film? Because I've never seen it.
Yeah, it was like I think he played a teacher. It was like it was almost like a small independent film. I think he may have even produced it, but I haven't seen it in a while to really get detailed about what happens.
Okay, so then we will move on. Forgive us, folks. We have day jobs and other things to do sometimes, so we can't get everything or see everything. So next we go into the 1980s, 1988 Shoot to Kill, which was also the film where Sidney Poitier broke out of retirement to make. This is a thriller action film that works wisely because he's an FBI agent on the hunt for a serial killer who we never know who it is, because Kirstie Alley's character is like this mountaineer taking a whole bunch of other people out, and any one of them could be a suspect. And I mean, even though it's a who's who of character actors playing the people, and they all seem a little disturbed in their own way, I think quickly you'll be able to figure out which one is the serial killer, because the film figures. I think it would have worked. The film might have worked a little tighter if they would have kept it a mystery a little longer. But by halfway through, they're like, forget this. Let's just have them chase these people. So he teams up with Tom Berenger, another mountaineer, who is also Kirstie Alley's boyfriend, to go catch up with them and catch the serial killer. And of course, Sidney's this big city cop, FBI agent, so he knows nothing of the mountain. So Tom Berenger has to teach him how to survive in the wild. And I remember, other than the reveal of who is actually the serial killer, the most memorable scene is when there is a bear attacking Tom Berenger and Sidney Poitier. And Sidney Poitier scares them all because he reasons, since nobody else around here has seen a black person, I figure why not the bear? That's what scares them off. This is a tight little film. Well, I mean, it was a box office champ of the year. It's still well remembered. I'm not going to say it's that great, but it's a memorable 1980s thriller. Andre, have you seen Shoot to Kill, and what did you think?
Seen it in bits and pieces, and I just recently watched the entire thing, and I was actually shocked how much I enjoyed it. It had the feel of 48 Hours, but with the races reversed, and obviously being in the woods instead of being mostly in a city environment. And again, he's playing the typical suit and tie cop. He's going after his man and doing it at all costs. But then him with Tom Berenger, who's the big woodsman. The thing that I like about it, even more so than the performances, is really the action scenes, the way that they're crafted, and the mountain climbing. Like the one part where it looks like Tom Berenger falls off of this rig and then he slams his body against a rock. I mean, I kind of cringe watching it, thinking this guy should be dead or at least bleeding to death, and only his hands bleeding. Weird enough, that was kind of odd. But otherwise, I mean, it's a nice, tight little thriller. You do find out who the killer is midway through the movie, and it should be obvious, And yeah, and also too, it's not entirely in the woods. By the third act, they end up in Canada trying to find this guy on the streets. So yeah, it's got a little bit of everything in there, and the humor it's not silly and over the top. I mean, other than the bear scene, And maybe when he's freezing to death and, Tom Berenger's trying to like hug him while he's shirtless. I was like, the only part was like a little bit homophobic. But other than that, I enjoyed it. I mean, it really was like, if you want to call it a 48 hours knockoff, this is one of the good ones.
Okay. Okay. Next, we go to 1988's Little Nikita, directed by Richard Benjamin, co-starring or starring River Phoenix, Richard Jenkins, Richard Lynch, and Richard Bedford, and of course, having Loretta Devine as a kind of love interest for Sidney Poitier. The first time in a while a movie had one for him. I can't say I remember this film, thoroughly. I remember it was always on cable though, and I remember even the movie's kind of like the title. It's a little silly, even though they want you to take all of this seriously, And I mean, it's okay, but it's not one of the ones I remember strongly that he was in. I just remember he was in it because really, other than Loretta Devine, they're the only Black people in this movie, which I guess in its own way wants to be a spy film, but it doesn't have that big stakes. It tries to make it seem like big stakes, but it just doesn't feel that way.
Little Nikita, the thing that I remember most about this is a lot of things I do remember, like the video art, and also used to be on TV quite a bit, like on HBO. Honestly, this is more River Phoenix's movie than it is Sidney Poitier's. It's just his performance being this kid who doesn't realize his parents were so spies, and then having to confront that is really the thing that stands out the most. And like his best acting in that movie is with Sidney. It's just everything about like the direction of it is just so bizarre. I think Richard Benjamin is a terrible director. I mean,
Damn.
For all the like, he could do something as good as Racing with the Moon and Mermaids, but then he does crap like City Heat and Milk Money and Marcy X. Let's not forget that one. He never directed a studio movie after that.
And hey, he directed Mermaids. That was okay.
Well, that's what I said. That's the only good one that he succeed with. But other than River Phoenix being the most memorable thing, it's bizarre with the parents, and then Richard Bradford being this Russian guy that's after them, but he's not the main bad guy at the movie. It's Richard Lynch, who's like the most over-the-top bad guy of the 80s. And the Loretta Devine role is what really weirds me out, that you could have gotten any Black female of that time. You could have gotten Radon Shaw, you could have gotten Shirley Ralph, you could have gotten Anna Marie Johnson to be the love interest. You get Loretta Devine, and not only
she was a Broadway veteran.
You tried to her, they have a love scene together, and it's just so weird. And she recently did an interview about that and how like scared she was to do that scene. But he was such a sweet gentleman. And I watched it and I was just like, no. I mean,
maybe that's
what Gregory Hines and Way to Exhale. Why did they think this was going to work?
Because Sidney Poitier probably signed up because he wanted to finally do a film with a sex scene, and so this is who they gave him.
Nichols or Tracy Reed, or I'm not
going to give him.
I don't want those images in my head.
They wanted to give him a young tenderoni who looked maybe a little more age appropriate. Come on, Anna Marie Horsford would have been way too young looking. Okay, anyway, on to our next film, 1991's Separate.
Sorry.
Okay. Next one is 1991 Separate but Equal miniseries, which is about the infamous court case Brown versus Board of Education, where Sidney Poitier comes in halfway, to play Thurgood Marshall, an older Thurgood Marshall at that. This is, a miniseries that, PBS put on, and it's infamous and it's shown in classrooms. It's a good representation. It tells the full story. Sidney Poitier obviously is not going to be bad in this. He has the most important role throughout. It's a good film. It's directed by George Stevens Jr., It has Lynn Thigpen, Gloria Foster, Cleavon Little, Burt Lancaster. Um, you know, it's good. It's educational. I have nothing bad to say about it. By any chance, did you see Separate but Equal?
So as of this recording, I've only seen the first part, and I'm only halfway through watching the second part. It's straightforward. I mean, it's pretty much a historical biopic about Thurgood Marshall and that particular Supreme Court case that allowed for segregation to be no longer the law of the land in schools. And so, obviously his presence and Burt Lancaster's presence, gravitas for the time. In terms of performance, it's nothing different than anything that he's done. Personally, to me, just from what I've watched, I think Chadwick Boseman's take on Marshall was a lot more stronger and more memorable than what Sidney's doing. But that's not to say that he doesn't, let me down. It's just when you see him on screen, there's a great importance. And that iconic status of his, it just shines all the way through.
Well, I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, with Chadwick Boseman, he's playing a younger and more debonair Thurgood Marshall, too, to be fair. And, then we have 1992's Sneakers, which, is kind of an underrated classic film. I love this film. If anything, it's because it's kind of an espionage tale that has violence but doesn't end with a action climax, and it's more of a thriller. There's deaths and all that, but there's no like gun battles. There's no big car chase. And I mean, most of the characters are fairly older also. So that might be another reason, with Robert Redford, David Strathairn, Dan Aykroyd, Mary McDonnell, Ben Kingsley, who's in everything. But that was really what was starting it. And Sidney Poitier plays an ex-CIA agent, and he's kind of more the security, shockingly, of the team, who has all the informants, and is written and directed by Phil Alden Robinson, who has helped make all those Patriot Games movies and actually directed one. Again, he's reunited with River Phoenix in this film, playing the youngest member of the team. Like I said, this is just a charming movie. I'm shocked Sidney Pollack didn't make this film. It's just so very charming. And, even if you take the storyline and, James Earl Jones cameo, by the end, you're just charmed by this film and like most of the characters. And, what did you think of Sneakers?
On this movie, me and my cousin, because of that cast and because of the overall theme of hacking back in the early 90s. It was like something, I'm not a hacker, but just that we had a fascination for that sort of thing as we were getting older. So yeah, I mean, in a weird way, as I've watched it, as I've grown up, it almost feels like this could have been a sequel to 3 Days of the Condor. Like if Robert Redford's character went off on his own, formed a team, was trying to get back at the bad guys. In this case, he's getting back at the Republican Party, which is like, okay, now I really enjoy this movie. But, again, Sidney's playing the suit and tie guy, but on the opposite side of the law. And it's kind of cool seeing him work with Redford and Aykroyd and bouncing off of them. And almost like he's sort of poking fun at himself to an extent with that part, which I kind of like.
Well, this, I will say, is one of those films that was a sleeper film because I was intrigued by some of the ads, but I was like, I'm not going to go see this in theaters. And then when I rented it and watched it at home, I was shocked at how much I liked it, So this was just one of those late, and I hate to say this, probably one of the few later roles of Sidney Poitier that I really enjoyed the role, and I really enjoyed the whole movie, No offense to Shoot to Kill, that was another one. But, again, Little Nikita just wasn't working for me, So, and then we have another infamous miniseries, the 1995 Children of the Dust, with an all-star cast of Michael Moriarty, Hart Bachner, Joanna Going, Regina Taylor playing Sidney's, again, younger love interest, Billy Worth, a favorite of yours, I'm sure, Grace Zabriskie, Farrah Fawcett, a young Jim Caviezel. This is Sidney's return to being in a Western. He didn't direct this one, but he is one of the main stars of the film. And this is an infamous film because his character ends up getting castrated in the middle of the film. Don't worry, it's a TV movie, so we don't actually see it. But we feel the effects. And unfortunately, even though this is a mini series, it's full of melodrama. That's the thing I remember the most about this, film or miniseries. Andre, have you seen this miniseries?
because I was recommended to watch it when I was preparing for my Western. And I was with it in the beginning. Oh, Sidney Poitier is going to fight the KKK. Okay, great. I'm going to go and check this out. Sidney Poitier gets jumped by the KKK, and they're going to castrate him. Oh no, they're not going to do that to Sidney. He's too much of a big star. He's an icon. He's got to get saved. But they go ahead and they do it, and they lost me after that. I'm like, how fucking dare you do that to an icon? I cannot forgive you for this movie. This movie should be buried and destroyed and probably locked up somewhere in the same little ditch where they locked up all the Atari games. Don't see this movie. It's his worst film in history. And fuck the director for making this movie.
I don't know if I can go that far, but yeah. I can see why you feel that way about this film. I don't think it's his worst, because we keep talking about To Sir with Love too. So, but at least he doesn't get castrated in that movie, though it might have livened it up. Because to me, his next film was 1996, To Sir with Love too, which to me just feels like they basically took the last pairing of Bill Cosby and Sidney Poitier and just put the script here with a multiracial cast, almost the same thing. Except instead of involving gangsters, we have this side story where he's trying to find the lost love of his life, and then, oh my God, he has a son. But rest in peace to both Sidney Poitier and Peter Bogdanovich. Just both not their best work. But just to go on a little longer about this, I waited so long for this movie to be made. I had even written synopsises for a To Sir with Love too at the time. And then I was so excited reading in Entertainment Weekly, oh my God, they finally made the sequel. And it's got Peter Bogdanovich. Then I watched it and not quite as strong a feeling as you had for Children of the Dust, but on that same wavelength. I'm like, this film, I would rather it be buried than anybody ever have to watch this. Next was a movie that actually made it to a theater finally with Sidney Poitier in it, 1997's The Jackal, remake of Day of the Jackal, directed by Michael Canton Jones and starring the pair up you've been waiting for, Bruce Willis, when he was still, competent as an action star, and Richard Gere with Diane Venora, J.K. Simmons, Matilda May, Steven Spinella, and young Jack Black. Strangely enough, he wasn't a big star then, but I still remember Jack Black's death scene in this movie. It's very violent. Bruce Willis is, obviously the Jackal, international assassin. And in this film, he also appears to be bisexual, Richard Gere has this Irish accent, I remember. And, and he's an ex-IRA, and they hire him to come, to find it. Diane Venora is a half-scarred Russian agent. And Sidney Poitier, of course, is the FBI agent in charge of Richard Gere. And I remember a scene where Richard Gere stands in between two trains going in different directions, trying to hold on to a pole switch. This film is very violent. I mean, they shoot off Jack Black's arm, RoboCop style, but they still have him running around. This film, it tries very hard, but I couldn't get into this film at all. I thought it was too much of an overkill, strangely enough, but I mean, Sidney Poitier does what he has to, but again, it's feeling again like more of a paycheck role for him, like Little Nikita here, than anything else. It's like he was just a name to put on the poster rather than, oh, I really want to play this FBI agent. What did you think of The Jackal?
Yeah, I remember when it was advertised because the big thing was, oh, Bruce Willis is playing a bad guy. And I mean, he'd done it before, but now this is like a big action film where he's the villain. And I saw it when I was on cable. I wasn't roll with it. There was nobody to really sympathize with. Sidney's character, pretty much like you said, was just a paycheck gig, could be played by Gene Hackman or any other actor. But I guess they wanted all the casting to be outside the box because Richard Gere wasn't really doing a lot of action movies back then. So to have him play the good guy and have Bruce play opposite, where everybody was used to him being John McClane and Die Hard, they thought they were being clever and they really weren't. And I know there was a little controversy at the time because originally Bruce Willis's character, the angle where he's basically undercover as a gay man and he's like living in this other gay guy's apartment. I heard he was supposed to kill that gay guy off because gay, just flat out. And then they found out later, that the test audiences were angry at that, so they decided, no, he'll get killed. And of course, Bruce Willis, he's deserving of that Razzie nomination of his because he didn't get along with Richard Gere when they did start to work together on this movie. So it's one of those many infamous stories about Bruce Willis before he lost that spark.
Well, I mean, he followed this up with Mercury Rising, so it was the beginning of the end for him somewhat. And I'm coming to the last film that I at least saw him in. 1998, again, a TV movie, David and Lisa, which is a remake of the classic independent film from, I believe, the 1960s. He plays a psychiatrist at this, mental hospital for disturbed teens, and it stars Lucas Haas and Brittany Murphy, because he's playing like kind of a overthinking genius, and she's a girl who can only talk and rhyme. And, there's, of course, all these different characters, interesting patients there, but it's more of a romance between Lucas Haas's character and Brittany Murphy. If you can call it that, it's more of a connection where at first she annoys the hell out of him, but then he starts finding himself, other than his psychiatrist played by Sidney Poitier, the only person he can connect with. Again, it's a sweet movie. But again, Sidney Poitier's role is more, I'm the authority figure here who's sympathetic towards my patients against, the hospital that's just like, oh, just drug them up and, try and cure them. But, we're just here to like get insurance money. But those are really the last films I remember him really acting in before, I guess he unofficially retired, where it was like, it's not as magical for him, but I mean, no offense to him or his legacy, but looking at his last roles, you can see why maybe he was like, you know what, it's time for me to get out the game, And of course, he wrote two autobiographies after this that were very spiritual and very uplifting, And of course, everybody cites him. Every dramatic actor usually cites him as an inspiration. But I'm going to ask you this. I think we know which one I'd pick. But out of all the films that you've seen and has been mentioned in this episode, which one would you tell people this is the one you should see first, or this is the one, quintessential for you as a Sidney Poitier performance?
Let's say In the Heat of the Night will be the first one to hook you in, and then at some point go back to the older material before you get to the later material of his.
Definitely. I would say, of course, To Sir with Love as a personal pick, but I agree with you, In the Heat of the Night. Also, I would say, I mean, if you want to see something a little more harder from him that he directed, I would also recommend Buck and the Preacher. But if you just want something entertaining, go with the triple, Uptown Saturday Night, Let's Do It Again, and a piece of the action. Because once you see a piece of the action, you've seen the better made version of To Sir with Love too. So I'm not going to let that go. Sorry. The one thing I wish we could have seen Sidney Poitier, which is what Denzel Washington is doing now, I wish we could have seen him try Shakespeare.
Yeah.
I don't know if he was never that interested or if studios just would never let him be in, a Shakespeare adaptation. They're ruling like, oh, those can only be played by Caucasians, whereas Denzel, and even though I'm going to give him credit, Kenneth Branagh, putting Denzel Washington in Much Ado About Nothing and making it more of an interracial cast as siblings too, not just, oh, look, a black guy, and and even Lawrence Fishburne's version of Othello. Those are the first times where we're really seeing African Americans in Shakespeare roles. And I kind of wish Sidney Poitier could have gotten a chance to play Shakespeare early in his career, so we can say he's a trailblazer for Black actors in those too.
Also, too, and many people may not notice unless you have the DVD, but John Landis mentioned on the extras for Coming to America that he had Sidney Poitier in mind to play James Earl Jones' role
Oh yes.
originally, but he was too intimidated to ask him because he was retired at the time and didn't think he wanted to do a comedy. But then after the movie came out, he ran into him at some event and told him, "Yeah, we were thinking about you for that part." And Sidney said, "Yeah, I would have done it if you called me up." So we could have had Sidney Poitier and Eddie Murphy together for an appearance, and that didn't happen. But I mean, I don't know if that would have even worked out because of Eddie's style of comedy versus Cosby being so clean at that time. I don't know if that would have worked the same way.
I think it would have. I mean, the film is already impeccable, and James Earl Jones gives a great performance, and kind of sets him up for his role in Lion King. But I think it would have given the movie maybe a little more class by having Sidney Poitier there, and it would have been interesting, the line about the bathing and like, I know I do, But I mean, come on, Sidney could. I mean, I would be intimidated talking to Sidney Poitier myself. But I mean, come on, he made Stir Crazy. Really? It's just like he's above this. I mean, no offense. He also made Fast Forward, so like, and Ghost Dad. Like, really? He's above that. So again, much respect to the late Sidney Poitier. You will always be an icon and a hero for us all, especially actors and African Americans. And, it's a great loss, but, I can say he had one of the better and best careers out there.
And not only that, I mean, obviously, he was a humanitarian. He fought for civil rights. He very much was all about, with his choices, trying to play performances that advance the culture and not turn the dial back. And one thing that probably should be of note that doesn't really get mentioned in the history books as much, but you got to remember, Stir Crazy was one of the #1 movies of 1980. It was one of the top grossing movies. So for a very long time, probably up until Ryan Coogler with Black Panther, he was probably the one Black director that had a film that made over $100 million. And that's quite a
Well, actually, don't forget Keenan Ivory Wayans with the Scary Movie franchise.
Yeah, but I'm talking about cultural relevance here.
Oh, shots fired. Okay, I didn't mean to interrupt you though.
That's all I was going to say. Like, he made his mark without a doubt.
Okay, I mean, he is always going to be a cinematic legend, no matter what. And he paved the way definitely for Denzel Washington to do anything Denzel wants to do. And it's always nice to know that they'll be mentioned in the same breath together, even though they have their own respective careers. But I guess you could say somewhat Denzel Washington is the Sidney Poitier of the times we have now.
Absolutely.
But luckily he's also gotten better chances in scripts. Denzel has his little Nikitas, but then he gets a good script, or he just directs his own script, a script of a movie that he'll direct. So that ends our business for this episode. And since this is a Sidney Poitier episode, I'm not going to diss his legacy by, suggesting another film you should see by anybody else. We told you the best ones to see. Hopefully we follow up this episode with more Sidney Poitier movies, or Andre will have seen some more Sidney Poitier movies by that time. And so will I, preferably early career, not his later TV movies. So that ends this business for this week, and we'll see you next time because we always have unfinished business.